Hey folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with another episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. Today we have a very special guest. He hasn't been on the podcast a whole lot, but he does a lot behind the scenes. He's an awesome pen tester on the team, Sam Killingsworth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So Sam is a pen tester here at Secure IT 360, does a lot of external pen testing. You might have seen him in some of the blog posts that have gone up on offsec.blog and on securit360.com. So Sam is in the category of first responders, and that's the theme of today's episode. So Sam has still has a day job, which I'll let him share about. But for some reason, he likes hanging out with us, doing pen testing things. So we're going to talk about his background, and we're going to talk about how he's kind of transitioned, or just, I guess, moved into cybersecurity, specifically pen testing. And I thought it would be a good episode to kind of get someone like his perspective on cybersecurity, kind of transitioning into the field, kind of what interests somebody in that role to look at cybersecurity as a career or as just another opportunity to earn some income, but also the challenges. And there's probably certain parallels and certain challenges that Sam has noticed or in what he's doing. So so that's what this episode's going to be about. I hope it's interesting. I hope it's valuable to those who are listening, especially for people who are firefighters, EMTs, first responders, police officers, any kind of law enforcement, stuff like that. I think this is going to be a good conversation for those who are looking for alternative career paths or just looking for something new. I hope this conversation is interesting to you folks. So, Sam, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, a little bit of your bio, what you do, what's your day job like, and kind of give us a background of where you're coming from in that regard.
Yeah. So I'm a career firefighter paramedic. I work in the Middle Tennessee area. Been a firefighter for I'm on my 14th year now, and
Nice.
been an EMT paramedic. Also worked in the emergency room setting as a nurse. That was a part-time job for me for quite a while until I got into cybersecurity. So been doing it for a while, still in it for the benefits, but taking over as part of the pen test team has been my part-time job now for almost 3 years. So,
yep. Yeah. And that's really interesting because, as you are looking for, well, I guess the question really to start is, what was your motivation? What got you interested in cybersecurity? Why pen testing? Why look at something else? You've been doing this for 14 years. Sounds like you enjoy it. I mean, it seems like you do, conversations and stuff. So what's the motivation for kind of looking at that other skill set, that other industry, that other career path?
yeah. So I'm an elder millennial. I'm a child of the 90s, so grew up in the computer lab, probably
Nice.
like a lot of our listeners. So always trying to bypass the systems and get to your gaming sites or whatever.
Addictinggames.com.
Exactly. So that's kind of how it started. The biggest motivator for me was in 21. I was still working in the emergency room as a nurse for my part-time job for extra income, and I had my second child, and that kind of really changed it for me because childcare is about as expensive as a mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
and so I needed a job that would be more flexible in the hours worked. It wasn't feasible for me to drive to the hospital, work a 12 or 13-hour shift, and then turn around and try to see my kids right before they go to bed. So,
Yep.
And to that notion, I'm been friends with Brad Causey, who's been on the podcast several times, our VP of Offensive Security, and he made a suggestion to me. He was like, "Why don't you try it out, see if you like it, and if you do end up liking it, we'll get you some work started." So
Yep.
that's kind of what prompted me to get into it was Brad.
Yep. Now I know When it comes to first responders, firefighters, EMTs, police officers, those in other law enforcement roles, I have to imagine, and this is just me curious, because I have friends who are in law enforcement. Was any of that motivation kind of stemming from like, hey, I could get injured on the job, bad things could happen and they're less likely to happen maybe if you're in a different career path? Was that something that was a consideration for you?
Um, Not necessarily, and it's funny that you bring that up because a lot of my guys, actually all of my guys, got injured in a fire and are off work right now.
That's why it was like front of mind, right? Because like I have to imagine like firefighters go into burning buildings, right? Like there's chances of injury there, severe consequences. Same with law enforcement, unfortunately. So just curious from your perspective if that played a role at all.
Yeah, I think in the back of my mind, it does lend some security to know that it's a great option if anything were to happen.
Mhm.
If I had a catastrophic injury, illness, something like that that caused me to not be able to do the job anymore. But the primary motivator was to be able to spend more time with my kids
Yep.
and not have to rely on the emergency room driving in and working 12 or 13-hour shifts for that second source of income.
Yep. Gotcha. So as you got into security, right? Brad was like, "Hey, why don't you try it out?" What did that look like for you? And then what kind of initially caught your eye as being like interesting, kind of kept you around and kind of curious about it, wanting to learn more?
Yeah. So the first advice that he gave me was to learn Linux. And there's several programs out there. There's the Linux for Dummies book. There's Udemy, however you pronounce it. They have a
Mhm.
lot of courses on there. Shout out to Network Chuck and Jason Dion. His courses are pretty good. I learned a lot of the stuff through that. So that was his first recommendation, was to kind of learn Linux, learn the basic commands. And I did job shadow with Brad a couple of times on some pen tests that he was working with. He was in the process of transitioning into the full-time role at Secure IT 360 at the time, and
Yep.
kind of building out his team. And his advice to me was, if you can learn this good enough to where you can pass the Security Plus exam and demonstrate some skills, then we can bring you on. And so um, I did some self-study online courses, um, was able to get the Security Plus certification, and then from that I began working as a 1099 employee. And then later, I think it was in 2021, later in the year, I was hired on part-time on the team officially.
Yep. Awesome. And what kind of so you learned Linux, you got Security Plus, got some training under your belt, and then eventually some actual engagements. What was there anything that kind of caught your eye as like being, oh, like I really like this aspect of it. I really like, this, or this is what's kind of keeping me coming back, or has you really curious about the field?
Yeah. So with my background, like I said, I am a firefighter, but I'm also a paramedic, and I was an emergency room nurse. And with all the medical training, medical problems that people have are kind of like a big puzzle. You try to figure out what's going on based off what you see, and then you try to pick the right treatment algorithm based on the symptoms that present. And that's kind of parallel to the offensive security world, in that you're searching for a piece of the puzzle, and then once you find that piece of the puzzle, you're looking for the algorithm to exploit it. So that's kind of a parallel that I drew, and just kind of the puzzle solving aspect of it is what really draws me in.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I noticed as well is I had never grown up like playing chess like in any serious kind of way. But there's been a number of chess like content creators that have like blown up on the internet. Um, so I start look, when I started in security, I started watching some of these chess players, and they started kind of blowing up on the internet and becoming really super famous and stuff. And I'm like, wow, chess is like a really interesting game. And then you start learning about it, and there's so much technique that's involved. There's so much skill and mastery and like just learning how chess works. I'm by no means a competitive chess player. I don't even play that much, but I equate security, and especially like pen testing and offensive security, kind of like chess, where there's a lot of technique involved once you get deep into it. But there's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of puzzles. There's a lot of thinking how the other player thinks, right? When you're doing a pen test, it's helpful to think about, the designer of the website or the developer or the sysadmin who set it up, right? It's helpful to kind of get in their mind space and think why they set up things a certain way, why they did things a certain way, why things are constructed in a way that they did. So that was kind of helpful to me, is like the puzzle aspect of it, and that really resonates with me as well. And I think a lot of people listening, especially people who, like you said, come from a first responder background where you're solving problems, right? You're looking for solutions to things. You're looking for things to fix something, and I think that background, that personality, those personality traits work really well in security, because that you're a nurturer, you're a healer, right? You're looking for ways to help fix a problem and fix things. So that makes a lot of sense. What skills do you think, coming from your background, right, in firefighting, EMT, nursing, medical field, right, that 14 years and more, what skills do you think have translated? You talked a little bit about kind of like the puzzle aspects of it and that kind of thing. Is there any other skills that have kind of transferred, or you've kind of drawing on some of that skill set to help with security?
Yeah, so I'd say the number one skill set that translates over would be interpersonal communication. Whether that's on a meeting with a client, explaining to them vulnerabilities and how to mitigate it, or in written communications through emails and through our reporting. That's the one biggest skill I think that's translated over. Knowing proper English punctuation, how to construct sentences, being able to explain stuff to other people. Explain like I'm five, in a way, because a lot of our clients are not technical people. Sometimes we're having to explain stuff not just to the CISO, but
Mhm.
also to the CEO or COO. And so I think being able to explain things in a way that people understand them, along with, like you said, the problem solving skills, is the biggest thing that translates over.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's funny because, you know, I've spoken to people who, a lot of people who are just getting into the field, right? And they just want to hack on things, and they just want to do the CTFs, or they just want to do the technical stuff. And it's funny because there's a misnomer that, when you get into pen testing, all you're going to be doing is like hacking, right? Like you're just going to be a hacker. Like there's a bit of a misnomer, and that there is quite a bit of communication. There's quite a bit of, you know, being self-disciplined and setting your own schedule and making sure that you are meeting deadlines and getting work accomplished, communicating, like you said. There's all these other things, these less tangible things that people in these professional careers, and especially from your background, I can see definitely helping with that transition and with those cybersecurity skill sets and kind of enhancing those. So it's interesting that you say that. So as far as the job goes, in kind of in general, maintaining a full-time job and doing part-time pen testing is a full task in and of itself, right? That can be super challenging. What other challenges do you think, kind of in general, have, or what other challenges have you had to kind of overcome when it comes to, learning security, learning pen testing, kind of learning what these vulnerabilities are, how to identify them, how to triage them, communicate them? What other challenges have you kind of encountered outside of just kind of like balancing the workload and schedule and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'd say probably the biggest challenge is a lot of the technical stuff, the terms, navigating through systems and networks just itself. Um, once once I encounter something that's new, I'm I'm immediately going and trying to find out more stuff about it through Google, through open source intelligence, whatever resources we have available, and then also kind of going back to the interpersonal communication. And I'll throw another one out there that translates to is teamwork, because
Mm.
a lot of the times I'm reaching out to someone like Darius or Tyler or yourself, Brad, Jordan, someone else on the team, like, hey, I've never seen this before. I'm not sure about this. What do you think? And that kind of sparks other conversations. So I think working as part of a team
Mhm.
and figuring out those problems together is another thing that really helps us out.
Yeah, that could be super helpful to have a supportive team to help, bounce ideas off of or just ask questions like, hey, how does this work? But like you mentioned, like just being able to Google is a skill set in of itself, right? Like being able to, and now I guess ChatGPT, and using AI is a thing as well, which I use often all the time for quick stuff or just troubleshooting, thinking through problems. But that's something that I think is not a skill set that everybody learns very easily or, just at all. I think there are some people who are kind of coming up the ranks and kind of getting into security that bypass some of the traditional like troubleshooting like roles, like help desk, like sysadmin stuff. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think you miss out on some of that troubleshooting stuff. So being able to kind of have that self-awareness to know like, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm going to go like figure out what that means, or I'm going to go like Google it and try to figure out what this thing is, or how it works and that kind of thing. Just kind of having that initiative, that self-starter kind of attitude, that self-discipline, is really helpful. I think there's a word for it, autodictat or something like that, where you're like a self-learner or
What'd you call me?
self-taught. I don't know how to say the word, but it's like autodidact or something like that.
We can call it self-discipline. That works.
Yeah. But like it's like when you're self-taught and you're kind of motivated to kind of teach yourself things. And I think that's a very important quality and something that you probably, as much as for like when it comes to firefighting EMT, like you can read about things in the book, right? Like you can go through courses and learn things, but I would imagine it's very much a hands-on thing. And I think cybersecurity is that same way. Could you kind of talk about like how there's parallels there with like the hands-on learning with your full-time job versus hands-on learning with pen testing?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think most of the people that are first responders are psychomotor learners. They learn by doing, learn by having hands-on approach rather than reading about it or hearing about something. And so to that aspect, there's a lot of resources out there, Hack the Box, CTF exercises, stuff like that, that allow you to practice those skills and practice while learning to get into the cybersecurity field.
Yeah. Yeah, cybersecurity is a lot like exercise. It's a lot like trying to get abs or trying to get like big muscles, right? You can read about the exercise all you want. You can read about how the perfect form to do a pull up or, a bench press or something like that. But until you actually try it, you don't actually know how it works. You don't actually know how your body is going to respond to it. You don't know how much weight you can, lift, right? I think the cybersecurity and pen testing is a lot of the same ways. Like you can read about a vulnerability or an exploit. You can read the code. You can, look at how it's going to interact with the system or how it's going to attempt to communicate with something or exploit something. But until you press go on that exploit, until you run it and you see the output, you see what happens, you see the results of it, you don't really get the full effect of that. You don't learn it truly how that thing works or how that vulnerability exists or things like that. So I think exercise is a good analogy. Same with, firefighting EMT. Until you go into the burning building, until you are the first on a scene responding to an incident, you don't really know how things are going to pan out. There's so many variables involved that you have to have that hands-on learning to get true experience and understanding of those topics.
Yeah, and there's also a parallel there in that no one incident is the same in the realm of first responders. Police officers, they're never responding to the same call. Same with fire and EMS.
Yeah.
In the same way, every offensive security engagement is going to be different. Even if you're doing a pen test on the same client 1 year over the next, they could have added stuff. They could have changed settings, added
Yeah.
host, implemented cloud. Like there's so many things that can change. It's a very dynamic environment. And I think that's another appealing aspect is that it's not boring, generic work. It's always different and it's always challenging.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Is just echoing what you said. A lot of what interests me about pen testing and security is the uniqueness of it. and kind of the freshness of it from, week to week, even though, there are some parts that are monotonous and some parts that are very boring and very much the same, from engagement to engagement. But yeah, there's always something, kind of looking at the glass half full, there's always something that is new, interesting, some other aspect that you haven't learned yet, or some other thing that you haven't learned yet that you can kind of dig into and kind of like pursue in terms of your understanding, your learning, or just having fun with the engagement. I definitely agree. What are there any specific lessons or anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you think translates well from firefighter EMT kind of background to cybersecurity?
Trying to think. I think we've hit on most of the important ones. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, I think teamwork. You mentioned teamwork. You mentioned kind of like the puzzle aspects of it. What about advice or I guess encouragement for other people who are in that same position? Maybe talk to people who are either unhappy with their job or they are happy. Maybe they're in the same boat as you were with like, hey, I just want more time with my family, with my kids, or maybe they just don't like the work at all. Maybe talk directly to those folks and be like, hey, this is some words of encouragement, some advice, some things to think about, maybe some gotchas to avoid, right? Some of the traps that maybe you could fall into, or some of the things to look out for would be helpful.
Yep. So I know a lot of pen testing firms, cybersecurity companies are going to be looking for formal education, getting an associate's or a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity or a related field, computer science. I do not have that. I'm self-taught and self-study and certified through CompTIA. So if I had to do it all over again and I was going to get in this field from the start, I would probably recommend that path. If you were to go into like the military or something like that, Air Force path, get your top secret SCI clearance. They'll pay for your Security Plus and all of those certifications. So that would kind of be like the starting point. If you're already a first responder, a firefighter, EMT, or a cop, I would recommend first networking. So making friends that are in the field. I think it was in Huntsville when we first met, and that was before I was just looking to get into it. And Brad brought me to one of the cybersecurity conferences in Huntsville. The OffSec team was there. I don't even think it was officially the OffSec team.
Yeah.
But it was in planning though. And so I got to meet a lot of people, got to shadow. I think that's another important aspect is job shadowing and make sure it's something that you want to pursue. And then after that, I would recommend self-study. If you don't really have that computer lab background of growing up in the 90s and trying to solve problems with the computers, maybe start with A plus and then go to Network Plus and then try to get your Security Plus. And all of those courses you can find online for relatively cheap. I think the Security Plus course I took was $20 maybe.
Yep.
And it's self-paced learning, learn as you go. And then once you get done with that, go and get your certifications. A lot of companies out there are looking for you to be certified before they put you to work. And then from there, like I said, just make friends and network and try to put yourself out there and see who's hiring.
Yeah, that's a great point. I often will, people will DM me and they'll ask like, hey, I want to get into cybersecurity. What do you think is the right path? Or what do you think, I should, what training should I do? Or what courses should I take? Or what certification should I take or get? And my first question is always like, well, what interests you? Like, what interests you about security? And I always try to encourage people to just try a lot of different things until they find the thing that they like. You mentioned Hack the Box, there's Try Hack Me, there's all sorts of these platforms, there's YouTube, for people who are getting into it or who want to transition or have an interest in security, who are coming from, whether you're coming from a first responder background, law enforcement, or traditional like you're in college, I would encourage you to go out and seek, videos, try Hack Me and try some of these CTFs, like even the introductory ones. Try your hand at it, stumble through some of these things and figure out kind of what you like and what direction you want to go. And when you do, like you mentioned, there's tons of resources. YouTube has millions and millions of hours of video that are free for people to watch and learn from.
Yeah,
TCM
absolutely.
Academy, Cybermentor has a number of free courses on their YouTube. There's free courses all over YouTube. So there's a ton of free content on YouTube that you can kind of peruse through to kind of get a sense of what the industry is like, what people are like, what the field is like.
Yeah, John Hammond and Network Chuck were the two on YouTube that I watched the most, and
Yep.
they were very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. They're two that are excellent at kind of like highlighting a thing and digging into it. John Hammond is a very much show and tell kind of person. Like he's going to walk you through like the steps and kind of explain them really well. And the same with Network Chuck. Like he talks about Kubernetes and Linux and VPNs and networking and all this different stuff. So if you're new or trying to get into the industry, watch a bunch of these videos and kind of figure out what piques your interest, and then go on to these training platforms like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, things like that. Try out some of those skill sets or kind of work on some of those things. Do what you can to kind of touch and feel kind of like the different aspects of what that job would be like. There's even blue teaming stuff now. It started out, it used to just be like Hack the Box and Over the Wire and things like that, where you just do pen testing type stuff or hacking into things. Now there's blue team stuff. There's SOC courses. There's SOC like training that you can do, security analyst. There's threat hunting and reverse engineering and all that sorts of stuff. So that's my advice as well, is try different things and see what kind of sticks and what resonates with you, and then go after that.
And even at a more basic level, set up your home network. Offer to your neighbor, like, hey, let me set up your your Wi-Fi. Let me open up a new SSID and then hide it, and other
I got
stuff
a really
like that
good
that's
one.
practical.
Set up the Wi-Fi for all your neighbors, and that way you know all of their passwords, and you could just use that as part of your botnet. No, I'm just kidding. Become your local tech support guy. But no, to your point, that trying things like you said, a lot of routers now come with the capability to create like separate networks, separate VLANs. If you're unaware what those things are super helpful to know, especially if you're going to be doing internal pen testing, if you're going to be working in Windows environments, particularly like corporate environments. Knowing about networking and VLANs and routing and all those kinds of things is super helpful to know. I'm actually doing an engagement this week where there are a number of networks and there are a number of things that I need to kind of figure out and map on this internal pen test. So that's super valuable to your point, and having some of those skill sets, and you can try it out like on your home network. Great.
Yeah.
Love
and
it.
it costs nothing. Just go practice.
Costs nothing but your time and all of your family yelling at you because the internet doesn't work.
Exactly.
Awesome. So any other last minute tips, tricks, advice, words of encouragement, anything to bestow on those listening who might be transitioning from any other field, to cybersecurity, things to think about?
So I'm able to do both jobs still because of our schedule. So at the fire department, I work what's called a 48-96 schedule. So we work 2 days and we're off for 4. And then in those 4 days that I'm off is when I'm doing the external pen test engagements for clients. So typically those are 3 or 4 days. And so I would say that the schedule lends itself more towards, or the pen testing realm lends itself more towards like a firefighter schedule. I know there's some EMTs that are on a 24/72 schedule where they work a day and have 3 days off. I'm not sure if that's common in law enforcement. So I would say, but before you're considering doing both at the same time, maybe look at your schedule and see if you could fit that in. But yeah, if it's something you want to pursue, I'd say that at the end of the day, it's all about how motivated you are and how easily you can learn by yourself. So As I mentioned before, I don't have formal college in cybersecurity or computer science. I've got a master's in emergency management, and it kind of touches on some cyber threats, just awareness perspective level
Yeah.
of, hey, these nation state actors are out there and they can shut down our SCADA systems, and that's terrifying. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would say the biggest aspect would be to learn, like we said, through Hack the Box, CTFs, online courses, and then practicing for yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great advice. I- so yeah, there's a lot more we could chat about, and there's a lot of other topics that we could dig into. I'm curious if anybody's listening who is in Sam's position or is kind of like a few years behind Sam of like, hey, I want to transition to security or anything like that. Or if anybody else has any other questions, let us know, drop us a comment on social media or shoot us a message somehow. And let us know if you have any questions that you want us to answer or just talk about on the podcast related to this topic. And we would love to do another episode. Maybe you can even do a live stream or something like that if there's a lot of people interested in kind of just chopping it up on that topic. Because it seems like I see a lot more and more every year of new people coming into the industry from other like non-typical paths, like not the college, help desk route, from other careers, other industries, and things like that. So I think it's always insightful to hear from people that have that background, particularly for me, because like I came up the college help desk, sysadmin route. So that's very different for me from like career transition, which has its own challenges. So yeah, if anybody has any questions that they want us to answer or talk about on the podcast, feel free to send us a message, shoot us a DM, and we would be happy to. So that's it. That's our episode. If you enjoyed this, give us a shout out on social media or just follow the show. You can find all of our content, whether it's a blog, white paper, podcast, all that stuff on offsec.blog, as well as securit360.com. We have a blog there. And with that, we will see you all next Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Spencer.